Hey everybody, I'm Jim Canigliaro, I'm president of the Independent Drivers Guild. As many of you know, the IDG focuses on real life issues and solutions for drivers to help them in their everyday life. We have IDG Legal, which is also an extension of the IDG, which does the same thing. It talks about everyday legal problems that drivers might have and their most frequently encountered issues to try to help them out when that time comes. Of course, the most frequent question we get or that drivers have to deal with, unfortunately, is New York traffic tickets. Traffic tickets could be expensive on their face just to pay the fine. But other than that, there's points involved. There's higher insurance costs, and hopefully this doesn't happen, but it could lead to a suspension of your license as well. I want to also introduce Jacky with the IDG. Jacky, want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jacky. I'm from the Independent Drivers Guild, and not only that, I'm also an IDG ambassador. And my job here is to help drivers get appointed to the right legal department in the legal department. So if drivers need tickets, we send them to Scott Feifer. If driver has tickets, I mean, not need tickets. But if they have anything else, you know, we can help out. Like for example, legal issues and immigration issues and housing issues. We will send them to the right department in the legal side.
And so drivers have reached out this year. We've had over 600 drivers reach out for traffic help. And so that's in a slow year while not a lot of drivers are actually on the road right now due to COVID. So drivers frequently need help with this. And so we have a great relationship with the law firm of Feifer and Greenberg. They've treated our drivers very well. They understand the industry and have been a great help to all of our drivers. So I want to introduce Scott Feifer. Scott?
Thanks, Jim. We, myself and my partner, we are Feifer and Greenberg, and we have lawyers throughout the state, and our focus really is moving violations, keeping people's driver licenses clean as possible, and helping advise them on the best things to fight, maybe the things they don't need to fight, sort of answering questions about where they are with their license, are they in danger of suspension, what strategies can be taken to avoid suspension. And we understand this is somewhat stressful stuff for drivers, getting pulled over, getting tickets, threat of losing their job, their license. So we take it seriously, and we do everything we can to help people out when they come our way.
Yeah, great. And so what kind of tickets are we talking about? Because drivers definitely feel targeted, whether it's taxi limousine or Easy Pass. I mean, there's a lot of violations they get. What violations do you handle, and do you typically see the most of?
Well, the ones we're most concerned with are the ones that will accumulate points on a driver license, on a TLC record, and affect driving insurance as well. Those are the ones that stand out the most, because other violations, not to say they don't count and they're not costly, but you take a parking ticket or something along those lines, or an Easy Pass violation, those aren't going to put points on your license. Those aren't going to affect your ability to work. So for the most part, there are things you could pay, but there are things you really need to be careful before you pay, because there could be ramifications, big ones, outside of the fine itself. So the stuff we're looking at: speeding tickets, cell phone tickets, fail to yield to pedestrian tickets, not signaling, disobeying signs throughout the city or HOV lanes outside the city. The typical ones where you're pulled over by a police officer is the classic moving violation that is going to cause the drivers, in my opinion, the most problems if they don't properly handle them and attend to them in court.
Right. And when you say in court, is it like the Supreme Court? Do they have their own kind of entity that deals with this, right? Right.
So depending on where you get a ticket, that's one of the unfortunate things about the way it works in New York. You could be in a great position if you happen to get pulled over in one county, and a mile down the road, You could be in a way worse position just because it's a different system, a different court, different prosecutors. So the system's divided. We look at it this way as there's pretty much New York City and everywhere else. New York City is handled by the Traffic Violation Bureau, the TVB. That's part of the DMV. So it's an administrative hearing, which is a little different than if you were to receive a ticket in Westchester or Nassau or Rockland or anywhere outside of New York City, where you're dealing with a real court, and the DA's office might get involved and help us negotiate things. In the city, at the TVB, there's no negotiation. Everything has to go to a small little hearing that's either win or lose. And that's a completely different procedure from outside the city. So it really makes a big difference where you get pulled over. But most of the drivers we see are getting tickets in and around New York City, the 5 boroughs, and that's where most of the for-hire vehicle activity is happening. And that's the most difficult agency to deal with, but it's also the one that lawyers like us would have the most experience dealing with due to the volume of the tickets issued there.
Got it. That's interesting what you say about negotiation, because I think a lot of drivers have the idea that, just to use an example, I was speeding 20 miles over the speed limit, and then I can get into court and the judge can reduce it to really 5 miles or change the speeding ticket to some other violation.
Yes.
That can't happen in New York City, right?
Correct. You'll see that we get calls like that all the time. Oh, my friend told me all I have to do is go in there and ask for no points. And look, it's not that simple outside the city, but it certainly doesn't work that way inside the city, right? They just don't negotiate. So everything you get in the city has to go to a hearing. If it is in the example you gave, a 4-point speeding ticket or a 6-point speeding ticket, for the most part, that ticket's going to end up either all or nothing. Either you win or you lose. You get the points and pay the fine, or nothing at all. It's no middle ground.
Right. So, I can see how that. So if you're guilty or not guilty, and that's it.
That's it. That's it, which makes it hard because people want to talk about, I was on my way to help us. There's different degrees of culpability. Some cases, people have decent excuses for maybe doing this or that. And outside the city, we can offer that to a prosecutor and say, hey, look, person's got a good record. This was a one-time thing. It was a tough situation, but the city doesn't offer for that type of subtlety. It's either you're in or you're out. You're guilty or not.
Yeah. So Jacky, what do you hear from drivers on that aspect? If you have somebody that's either guilty or not guilty, what kind of feelings or what questions does that trigger amongst drivers?
So, a lot of drivers, what they want to say is, what are the chances of beating the ticket, right? Yeah. And the reason why I say that is because drivers, they don't really care about how much fees they got to pay to the lawyer. They just want a really, really good success rate. So if you tell them, hey, if I'm this lawyer, majority of the tickets he gets beaten, where they don't have to pay the fine, they just pay the lawyer some fees, they'll be very happy to do so. Especially in the drivers in my community, they don't mind spending $200, $300, $400, but the fact that the results is what matters to them. I do tell them that, the lawyers that we have, they're very, very professional in this field. They've been doing this for over 30 years. And from doing this, they have actually won a lot of the tickets, but, it's different for everybody. One thing they do have questions of is, like, for example, what do they have to attend a hearing with the lawyer, or if they need an interpreter? These type of questions.
Well, there's a lot of good points in there. I tell people this about attorneys at the Traffic Violation Bureau, and I hear you on the questions about the chances of winning. Who wants to pay for a 1 in 1,000 chance of success? That's not going to do anyone any good, and I get that. I tell people this: A, look, this is what we do. This is what the lawyers who are there regularly do. So clearly, we're going to give people their best chance to win. B, we're going to make it as easy as possible on people because they don't have to come to court with us. They really, very, very rare will want them in court, and it's always voluntary. No one has to be in court. There are a few exceptions to the rule where we'd like to have people there, but for the most part, drivers do not need to come to court. as far as their chances to win go. You might see stuff online where attorneys post it's 68.2% in this court, 59.1% in this court. Personally, my firm has never done that because we think it's kind of nonsense. You don't know who the judge is going to be in advance. We don't know what the officer is going to say. We don't know what the officer has in his notes. All the things that might sort of spell out a good case or a good chance to win versus a tougher one. We don't have any of that information beforehand. So it's very hard to predict a case beforehand, but I could say that more often than not, cases get dismissed. This isn't some kind of 1 in 1,000 chance, some kind of crazy long shot. Everyone has a legitimate chance to win if you know what you're looking and listening for. I would add one more thing to that. When you talk about these hearings in New York City, when it's sort of a win or a lose, you know, this all or nothing type of system, people come to me and say, well, you know, it was a red light ticket and the light wasn't red. Do I have a good case? Well, in a perfect world, you have a perfect case. The light wasn't red. You should never be convicted of a red light ticket. But the reality of the situation is I can get 3 different drivers who tell me, you know, one of them can tell me the light was red and they know they went right through it. Another one can tell me the light was green and they have no idea why they got a ticket. The other one could say the light was yellow and it was a close call. But guess what? All 3 of those cases, we're going to have an officer who's going to come in and say the light was red. That's why he wrote the ticket. That's why the officer wrote the ticket. So your chances of winning really aren't tied in either to what actually happened. It comes down to how good of a job the officer does in court, what he remembers, what he can testify to, what's in his notes, and of course, what judge we get randomly assigned to. That has a big deal, plays a big role as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So some drivers will say, well, do I pay if I lose? Right? Or is there, you know, can my money that I pay you to fight the ticket be contingent on you winning the case?
Sure. Yes, we do get that question a lot. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to do that according to the Bar Association. There's only certain types of cases you can actually take on a contingency base, and those are cases where it's a monetary outcome, not a penal outcome, which is more technically. That said, there might be some lawyers out there willing to do that. The way I see it is we're reputable lawyers. We work hard. We do everything we can. In some cases, we go to court multiple times for cases to try to get them dismissed. We keep our fees as low as we can. And we hope our clients trust that we're doing everything we can to win. You know, the game for lawyers isn't to get the client's money and run away. The game is to make the client happy and have the client come back again, tell his friends. I mean, that's really why we're in business.
Are there benefits? Let's assume you lose. Let's assume a driver loses his traffic violation case. Are there still benefits to fighting the ticket? Is there something around when the points start to accrue? Or maybe that's the question. When do points start to accrue on the license? If I get my ticket in 2020 and my case is in 2022, just to use round numbers, like when do those points start to accrue on me as a driver? Sure.
That is an incredible point of confusion with drivers, and we get these questions all the time, and it could be hard to describe, but in practicality, it's not that difficult to understand. The points, there is no way to game the system or say, hey, let's fight it, let's extend it because that's going to help me avoid the points. That's a common misconception. People don't get rewarded for taking a long time to fight their case. It's not how it works. What happens with points, when you talk about points, what the DMV is looking to do is penalize people that accumulate too many points in a sort of a tighter period of time, okay? So the 18 months is the period they're looking at. So to give you an example, if someone were to get 11 points is the rule of thumb, where you're going to get suspended if you get too many points, if you go to 11 or more. So let's say someone has 2 6-point speeding tickets. Well, if they're guilty of both of them, that could conceivably be 12 points. If they were issued within the same 18-month period and you end up guilty of both of them, even if you're guilty of one in 2022 and one in 2028, after you're guilty of that second one in 2028, they'll go back in time, see you had 12 points accumulated in that 18-month slot of time, and they can suspend you years later for that. So putting the hearing off doesn't help anyone. On the other hand, if you get two speeding tickets 2 years apart from each other, DMV says, okay, they're far enough apart that we're not going to add the points from this ticket and this ticket. And they're sort of separate in their own time periods, and you're not in danger of suspension. So it's all about date of issuance and not accumulating too many points in any 18-month period. That's really what it all comes down to.
Got it. So it's generally 18 months is the rule or the law that the DMV looks at. It's within this 18-month period as far as how many points are accrued.
Correct. So when people say to us, big question is, when will these points be off my license? How long are they on my license for? Well, you take that example with the person who gets two 6-point tickets in 2020. One of them could be finished in 2022. He could be convicted. The other one in 2028, he can be convicted. So 2028, he could be suspended for these two tickets you got back in 2020. So if someone says to me, well, it's only 18 months I heard about these points. I say, well, look, it's 8 years later and these points can still hurt you. So they're not off your license. But on the other hand, if you were to get a new ticket in 2028, you would clearly not have to worry about those points being added together from that ticket back in 2020. So it all depends on how you look at it. But the key is it's always going to come down to the date you got the ticket. The ticket was issued. That's really the date that controls.
Right. Yeah. So just talking about multiple tickets, Jackie, I think I hear a lot of drivers have questions about the multiple tickets they might receive at one time, right? So we've talked about drivers being targets in the industry, especially rideshare drivers. So if they get pulled over by an officer, they might get, multiple tickets at the same time. So Jackie, what are some of the I guess concerns at that point from drivers?
The drivers that are concerned at that point, what they worried about is how much do they have to pay for the ticket, or the tickets. In that case, where they say, oh, because some lawyers they will charge for every single ticket that the officer gave, compared to some, they don't do that. So, what are your Scott? What are your charges for those kind of tickets?
Sure. So when we charge, we look at a case, and a case can be made up of one ticket, or like you guys are saying, it could be made up of multiple tickets. There's certain tickets that you'll see issued together more commonly than other ones, but certainly anyone who gets pulled over it could be issued 2, 3, or 4 tickets as easily as they could be issued one in many cases. But we look at that as one case, and we charge as one case. There are always exceptions to every rule. Sometimes someone comes to us with 12 tickets in one case. We got to start asking what happened here and why was the officer so upset, and the fees could reflect that eventually. But we're always going to try to keep the fees as low as we can, and we really do look at it as it's one case. Now, as far as points and stuff like that, obviously you don't want multiple tickets, but as far as legal fees go, it shouldn't drive them up at all. And if they do, certainly not by multiples. 3 tickets shouldn't be 3 times, 1 ticket. It doesn't really work that way.
That's good. That's good to hear. Good. So I think, Jackie had a question before about an interpreter, which I think was a good question. What happens for drivers that, look, I mean, the fact is about 90% of our drivers are immigrants. This system is confusing to me and, to people that have lived here. I'm an attorney and I wouldn't know what to do in a traffic violation bureau case. So, what happens with the driver that doesn't speak English that well or is in English as a second language? Does the court provide an interpreter? What's the process there? Again,
if someone's working with a lawyer in New York City, they really don't need to be there. So that could be another good reason not to bother coming if you're not so comfortable speaking speaking English to the judge under oath and all that stuff. The TVB, the New York City traffic courts, they're not providing any interpreters. You'll often see people running around the hallway looking for someone who would volunteer to come and translate for them. Sometimes they bring a friend, but they will not provide anyone. More serious courts, the criminal courts, things like that, they're going to provide a translator for you because they have to make sure that everyone's understood and understands what's going on. The traffic court isn't. They should be, but they're not as concerned with that. So no, if you really want to be there and you want to testify and say your piece, that's okay. But just make sure if you're not comfortable with English, you bring someone who can help translate. And not a witness. It would need to be someone separate from the case.
Yeah, so it seems like for me, because the IDG call center has translation services, so it seems like to me that you would work directly with our call center to have your information translated. And then once they send it over to you, they don't have to go to court anymore. So it seems like that would be a good process for them to work with us to get the information you need. And then your team can kind of take it from there.
Sure. The paperwork that we send out to clients originally or at the beginning of a case invites them just to send us a casual email. Let us know what happened, and if you need to work with the translator so we can understand it better, that's of course fine. And we review every single statement that comes in, every single note, picture. It's fine, bring it in. We like that, and we'll follow up and say, okay, maybe this is helpful, maybe this isn't. Do you have something else? Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff people send us is not very helpful. You know, a picture of a stop sign is not going to show us that the person stopped at that sign. But it certainly doesn't hurt to review, so we encourage anyone to send in anything they think might help. Yeah.
Great, cool. So I think now would just be a good time to go into process. So we have our website. Like I said, we have a call center that handles translation services. We have just easy forms on our website where you can upload the ticket. But once a driver gets to our website, they fill out our forms at the IDG, or they talk to our call center rep who fills it out for them. That gets directly sent over to you. So what happens there? How long do they get feedback from you? Do they have to sign anything directly from you? After we bridge that gap with the driver and get them the preferred discount, which we'll talk about, what happens next?
Well, we get the form, and the form is sort of sent to we have it sent specifically to a general mailbox that all our admins see and the lawyers see right away as soon as it comes in. And we'll take a look at the matter. And if it's a classic traffic ticket without any particular complications or questions on our end, we'll send out what we call an introduction package, which is really just a quick information sheet letting the driver know who we are, what we do, how much we charge, and letting them pay and authorize us right there on their phone or their computer electronically to get started. And that comes right back to us, and great, we're in business if so. If someone has a question, they have our information with everything we send them, pick up the phone, give us a call. They might say, hey, can we talk about this first? And then we give a consultation and we'll go over it. But the idea is really to make it all as smooth. You know, at the end of the day, while these are big stakes for the drivers, from a legal perspective, it's a pretty small potato stuff. It's a New York City traffic ticket through the DMV, so there's not a whole lot of paperwork or anything like that to get us started. So we try to streamline it and get people going as quickly as possible. And if there are questions, we take it from there.
Right. And I'll just give the quick disclaimer to please check your spam accounts, right? Because these things sometimes get lost. We're all sending a lot of emails to each other. So
Yes.
they will get it, but check your spam account first before you call.
Unfortunately, we've tried many different things over the years. There is no such thing as 100% technology. We haven't found that yet.
Good. So I think, one of the last questions I have just on process is how long does it take, right? So, when, as opposed to what I think you see the hearing date on the back of the ticket, if that's right, or you'll get a hearing date in the mail, and then just generally, how long does the whole process take?
Sure. So in New York City, no one really knows the hearing date right when you get the ticket. You have a certain amount of time to reply. They say 15 days. It's really a little longer than that. But once we reply, it's a not guilty plea, we enter, then a hearing date is set. And that hearing date could be 2 months down the line, it could be a year down the line. And that's just depending on the officer's availability in court. Now, add to that administrative reschedules. The courts sometimes need to reschedule things on their own. Sometimes your lawyer might want to reschedule something for strategic reasons. There are reasons we might think we're better off pushing the case down the road a little bit. Then you throw in COVID or a situation like that that's sort of out of the court's control, and that could push cases back even further. So the typical case these days could take a year and a half, 2 years on average. Some of them in some courts can take even longer. It's not a quick process. Again, it doesn't help, going back to a previous question, it doesn't help anyone avoid points or anything like that. But what we like to say is the officer's recollection, the officer's notes, they're not getting any clearer or better over time. So there's really no harm in things getting, if anything, it's going to help our case. Probably won't make a difference, but if anything, it could be helpful to have it pushed off like that. So it's fine by us when it happens.
Great. Yeah, and Jacky, I have one more question, and then feel free to jump in. For me, we have formed a great relationship with your firm. I haven't seen the discount that your firm provides for IDG drivers. I haven't seen that anywhere else. But I can tell you, just this year alone, we've saved thousands of dollars for drivers. And that alone, with the process that we try to make as simple as possible with translation. I just want to thank you for the discount and the attention you give our drivers. And I think it's been a really great partnership.
No, the feeling's mutual. Yeah, we appreciate the drivers. We try to treat everyone as, like our most important client. And I can say that with 100% certainty, there are no drivers paying the same fees as your members. We do everything we can to help the drivers take advantage of these memberships. And I think that when you consider that these are people driving for a living, and this is one of the most one of the biggest obstacles drivers face of these tickets and getting pulled over by police, it's important to have an affordable way to try to combat all that.
Jacky, any other things that come up?
So I want to say something about this. I have a friend of mine, a driver friend, right? He went to the Long Island ticket office, the ticket court on himself. He tried to do the settlement himself. And what they did is they offered him 5 points with some more money when he tried to do the settlement thing. And then he called me right after that. He's like, Jacky, I have a couple of tickets. I want to get rid of the points because I don't want to lose my license. So the first thing I did was I took the pictures of the tickets. I put it through IDG Legal. And when I put it through IDG Legal, Scott and his team was able to come back really quickly and put the tickets in right away. Within a few days, he was able to get a response, and he got 0 points on all his tickets. It was a one-time stop with several tickets. I believe it was like 4 or 5 tickets. I don't remember too well about that part, but it was a few tickets at one time. And thanks to Scott and his team, we were able to help him get 0 points and just a fine. So, thank you, Scott.
Like hearing those stories.
Right there. So just on that, Scott, that was a Long Island case. Your firm, is it statewide?
It's statewide. My partner and I started this in the mid-90s doing this. And over time, what happens is, look, I'm not going to pretend that I'm running to every court in the state every day, but we've built up relationships with a lot of lawyers around the state who do what we do. And fortunately for us, are very familiar with their particular area. So if someone's representing anyone who represents our clients in court is someone who has particular experience in that particular court. And that doesn't mean that the judges just throw things out or give them no points, but they know, which situations might be a little tougher, which situations to try to avoid, which officers and prosecutors might be a little more negotiable. And that's important. That it really is important. It helps keeps costs down because people are local, they're not traveling very far. And I think it helps drive the quality of our results due to the experience and knowledge they have in that court. And really, there's no corner of the state we haven't been to at this point. And that's a good story about the no points. You know, the unfortunate truth is lawyers aren't working miracles in this. We don't just walk in and snap our fingers and get the points to go away. There are prosecutors and norms that these different courts have. Some will say, hey, we can't give you no points on this type of ticket. You know, we can't just blow right through all that. You know, courts have their own rules, but we can know in advance, hey, we have experience here. We can tell clients, look, we may only be able to do this. We may only be able to do that. We try to be very realistic about it. And I think people appreciate that. You know, they don't want us just to sit there and blow smoke. They want to know what they're facing. So I think it's important to have that local experience so you can better advise people what they're looking at, what they might expect as results, and all that type of stuff.
That's great. Well, look, like I said, we appreciate the partnership, and I hope this information is helpful. We'll try to get it out to as much drivers as possible. We check back with all our drivers after we send them to you, and we make it our business to kind of survey that. And so, you know, nearly 90% of the drivers surveyed recommend the service. We'll get that even higher, but we'll probably post some of the reviews. We get great reviews from drivers on the service, and especially the customer service that you guys care for our drivers with, and we appreciate it. So we'll post those. If you have a traffic ticket, it's idglegal.org. Our phone number's on there. You can call IDG direct. And any text message, phone, chat, you can reach out to us. So Scott, Jacky, thanks again. And I look forward to keeping the relationship and helping as many drivers as possible.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jacky.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Jim.